There are moments in life when a single gesture, so small you barely notice, it becomes the thread that unravels everything you thought you knew about yourself. Maya Chun had served thousands of cups of coffee in her 3 years at Cornerstone. Calf, each one handed over with the same quiet smile that made her nearly invisible to the world. She preferred it that way. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no one could see the dreams she'd buried beneath student loans and the weight of being the family's only hope for a better life. But on that ordinary Tuesday morning, when she noticed the exhaustion in a stranger's eyes and did something as simple as drawing a tiny sun in his latte foam, Maya had no idea she was about to discover that sometimes the smallest acts of courage echo the loudest. What she didn't know was that the man clutching that coffee cup would spend the entire night staring at that little sun, remembering what it felt like to hope. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through Maya's thin apartment walls at 5:30 every morning, just as it had for the past 3 years. She rolled out of bed, careful not to wake her younger brother Carlos, who slept on the pull-out couch in their cramped living room. The coffee-stained journal tucked beneath her mattress remained hidden, its pages filled with architectural sketches that she'd never shown anyone, not her parents, not her brother, not even herself in daylight. At Cornerstone Cafe, Maya moved through her routine with practiced efficiency. Steam hissed from the espresso machine, milk frothed into perfect peaks, and orders flowed in an endless stream. She knew every regular customer's preference. Mr. Peterson's double shot Americano, black, Sarah from the bank's oat milk latte with an extra pump of vanilla, the college students who ordered the cheapest drinks and lingered for hours over textbooks, but they didn't know her. To them, she was simply the quiet barista with the gentle smile, the one who never made mistakes, but never made conversation either. She existed in their peripheral vision, a fixture as familiar and unremarkable as the chalkboard menu behind her head. During her 15-minute breaks, Maya would slip into the storage room and pull out her worn journal. Her pencil would dance across the pages, sketching soaring glass facades, innovative public spaces, buildings that seemed to breathe with life. These drawings were her secret sanctuary, the place where her dreams lived unconstrained by reality. The reality was brutal in its simplicity. Her parents, who had immigrated from Taiwan when she was 5, worked double shifts, her father at a factory, her mother cleaning office buildings at night. They had sacrificed everything for their children's education, reminding Maya daily that she was their investment in the American dream. But architecture school required money they didn't have, connections they'd never formed, and a confidence Maya had never developed. "You have stable job," her mother would say in her broken English whenever Maya hinted at other possibilities. "Coffee shop good, safe. You help Carlos with college, then maybe think about yourself." So Maya served coffee and buried her dreams deeper with each passing day. She watched through the cafe's large windows as architects in pressed suits hurried past, briefcases full of blueprints and possibilities. Sometimes she imagined herself among them, but the fantasy always crumbled when the next customer stepped up to the counter, bringing her back to her small, safe world. The journal was her only rebellion, its pages a testament to the architect who lived inside the invisible barista. Late at night, she would trace her finger over the sketches, imagining what it would feel like to see her designs rise from paper into steel and glass, to create spaces where people could live and work and dream. But dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford, and Maya Chun had learned long ago that some people were meant to serve coffee while others were meant to build the future. David Park sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Park Industries building, staring at the crumpled business card he'd pulled from his jacket pocket for the 3rd time that day. He should have thrown it away. What use was a business card to someone who already knew exactly who he was? But something about the way the shy barista had smiled when she handed him that latte with a tiny sun drawn in the foam had stopped him from discarding it entirely. The sun, such a simple thing, yet it had undone him completely. 3 years had passed since his daughter Emma died in the car accident. 3 years since his world had collapsed into a gray landscape of endless meetings, architectural projects that felt hollow, and nights spent avoiding the empty bedroom down the hall. Emma had been 7 years old, obsessed with drawing suns on everything: napkins, homework assignments, the fog on car windows, even the walls of her bedroom, which David had never been able to bring himself to repaint. "Daddy, suns make everything happy," she had told him the week before the accident, pressing a crayon drawing of a massive yellow sun into his hands. "Promise me you'll remember that when I'm not here to remind you." At the time, he'd laughed and ruffled her hair, never imagining those would be among the last coherent words his daughter would ever speak to him. The drawing was framed on his desk now, faded but treasured, a constant reminder of the light that had been extinguished from his life. His wife, Jennifer, had left 6 months after the funeral, unable to bear living in a house filled with memories of their daughter. "I can't watch you disappear, David," she had said, her voice breaking. "Emma's gone, but you're still here. Please, be here." But he hadn't been able to find his way back. Park Industries continued to thrive under his leadership. His team was talented, his reputation sterling, his buildings monuments to architectural innovation. Yet every morning when he looked in the mirror, David saw a hollow man going through the motions of a life that had lost its meaning until yesterday morning, when exhaustion had driven him to seek caffeine at a small cafe he'd never noticed before. The barista had been so quiet, so unassuming, that he'd barely looked at her until she'd placed the cup in front of him, and he'd seen it, that perfect little sun, created with such care in the foam of his latte. For a moment, sitting in that humble cafe, surrounded by the gentle hum of conversation and the aroma of roasted beans, David had felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope, just a flicker, but unmistakable. He'd carried that cup back to his office, unable to drink it, unable to disturb the delicate artwork that reminded him so powerfully of Emma's joyful creativity. He'd sat there for hours, staring at that foam sun until it finally dissolved. But the feeling it had awakened in him remained. The barista's business card, retrieved from the small holder by the register, seemed to pulse with possibility in his hand. Maya Chun. Such a simple name for someone who had managed to crack open his carefully constructed emotional armor with nothing more than steamed milk and kindness. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the thick cream envelope that had arrived at her apartment that morning. The return address was embossed in elegant gold lettering, Park Industries, followed by an address in the city's most prestigious business district. The official letter inside was brief but formal, requesting her presence at their offices the following day at 2 p.m. for a meeting with Mr. David Park, CEO. "What did you do?" Carlos asked, peering over her shoulder at the letter. At 19, her brother possessed the kind of easy confidence that Maya had never developed. But even he seemed nervous about this unexpected development. "I don't know," Maya whispered, her mind racing through every interaction she'd had at the cafe in recent weeks. Had she accidentally offended someone? Made a mistake with an order? The letter gave no indication of the meeting's purpose, only that formal request for her time. Her mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What is this about, Maya?" "I don't know, Mama. Maybe I made a mistake at work. Maybe someone complained about me." Maya's voice grew smaller with each word. This was exactly why she preferred to remain invisible. Visibility meant vulnerability, meant the possibility of being found wanting. "Park Industries is big company," her father said, looking up from his newspaper. "Very successful architecture firm. Why they want to talk with you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya had no answer that made sense. She was a barista at a small cafe, someone who existed on the margins of other people's important lives. She had no business being summoned to a meeting with a CEO, no matter how politely the request was phrased. That night, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. Perhaps she had unknowingly served coffee to someone who'd gotten food poisoning. Maybe she'd accidentally charged someone incorrectly, and they were pursuing legal action. The letter lay on her nightstand, its presence as heavy as a stone. She thought about calling in sick to work, pretending the letter had never arrived. She could throw it away and continue her invisible life, serving coffee and sketching buildings in secret. But even as the thought crossed her mind, Maya knew she couldn't do it. The letter was too official, too formal to ignore. Whatever this meeting was about, avoiding it would only make things worse. At 3 a.m., she finally fell into a fitful sleep, her dreams filled with imposing office buildings and disapproving faces. In her dreams, she was even smaller than usual, shrinking until she disappeared entirely. leaving only the echo of her footsteps in empty corporate hallways. The next morning, Maya, dressed in her only professional outfit, a navy blue dress she'd worn to her high school graduation, and prepared to face whatever judgment awaited her at Park Industries. The Park Industries building stretched 47 floors into the Seattle sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the afternoon clouds like a mirror. Maya stood on the sidewalk outside, craning her neck to see the top, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and light, filled with people in expensive suits who moved with the kind of purpose that comes from knowing exactly where you belong in the world. She approached the reception desk with hesitant steps, her voice barely audible when she announced herself. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, checked her computer and nodded. "Mr. Park is expecting you. Please take the express elevator to the 42nd floor. His assistant will meet you there." The elevator ride felt like ascending through different layers of society. Maya watched the floor numbers climb, each one taking her further from the world she knew and deeper into a realm where she clearly didn't belong. Her reflection in the polished elevator doors looked pale and uncertain, her thrift store dress a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her. David Park's office was a corner, suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. But Maya's attention was immediately drawn to the framed child's drawing on his desk, a vibrant yellow sun with rays stretching across construction paper, drawn with the uninhibited joy that only children possess. "Maya," said a familiar voice, and she turned to see the stranger from the cafe, the tired man with kind eyes who had ordered the latte 2 days ago. "Thank you for coming." The recognition hit her like a physical blow. This was David Park, the CEO, whose company designed some of the city's most iconic buildings. She had served coffee to one of the most successful architects in the region, and now he was standing in his office, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry," Maya stammered, her hands nervously fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I don't understand why I'm here. Did I do something wrong? I can pay for the coffee if there was a problem with the charge." "Maya, please sit down." David's voice was gentle, and he gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Quite the opposite, actually." As she perched nervously on the edge of the chair, David moved to stand by the window, his back to her. "The sun you drew in my latte foam," he said quietly. "It reminded me of something very important that I had forgotten." Maya's confusion deepened. She had drawn hundreds of simple designs in coffee foam over the years, hearts, leaves, basic patterns that customers barely noticed. She couldn't understand how such a small gesture could have led to this moment. "My daughter Emma used to draw. Suns everywhere," David continued, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that made Maya's chest tighten. "She died 3 years ago, and I thought I had forgotten how to see beauty in simple things. But your kindness, that little sonnet, brought something back to life in me." He turned from the window, and Maya saw tears in his eyes. Her own journal slipped from her nervous grip, falling to the floor and spilling open to reveal pages of architectural sketches, detailed drawings of buildings, public spaces, innovative designs that she had never shared with anyone. David's expression changed as he looked at the scattered drawings, his professional eye taking in the raw talent displayed across the pages. "Maya," he said softly, kneeling to help gather the sketches, "these are remarkable. Did you draw these?" Maya's face burned with embarrassment as David carefully examined her sketches, his trained eye moving across each drawing with a kind of focused attention she had never experienced before. The portfolio sketches that had seemed so promising in the privacy of her bedroom now looked amateurish and naive under the fluorescent lights of his office. "I'm sorry," she whispered, reaching for the drawings. "They're nothing, really. Just silly doodles I do sometimes when I'm bored." "Don't apologize," David said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "These aren't silly doodles, Maya. This is exceptional work." He held up a sketch of a community center she had imagined, its flowing lines and innovative use of natural light evident even in her rough pencil strokes. "Where did you study architecture?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt her throat constrict, a familiar weight of inadequacy settling on her shoulders. "I didn't," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I never went to architecture school. I can't afford it. And besides, I'm not smart enough for something like that. David set the sketch down carefully and leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. Maya, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've seen work from graduates of the finest architecture programs in the country. What you've drawn here shows an intuitive understanding of space, light, and human interaction that can't be taught in a classroom. This is raw talent. She shook her head, unable to accept what he was saying. You're being kind because I made you coffee. I'm just a barista. I don't know anything about real architecture. You know more than you think, David said quietly, and I'd like to offer you an opportunity to learn more. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Park Industries has an internship program for promising young designers. It's typically reserved for architecture students, but I believe in making exceptions for exceptional talent. Maya's world tilted. An internship at Park Industries? It was beyond anything she had ever dared to dream, so far outside the realm of possibility that she couldn't process what he was offering. I don't have a degree, she said, her voice shaking. I don't have any formal training. I wouldn't know what to do in a place like this. You would learn, David replied simply. The internship comes with a small stipend, not much, but enough to cover basic expenses. You would work directly with our design team, learning the practical aspects of architecture while developing your natural abilities. The offer was generous, beyond measure, but Maya felt panic rising in her chest. This was too much, too fast, too far from the safe invisibility she had cultivated. My family needs me at the cafe, she said, grasping for reasons to refuse. We depend on my income. The stipend would be comparable to what you're earning now, David said gently. Maya, I'm not asking you to abandon your responsibilities. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that you might have something extraordinary to offer the world. She stared at her drawings scattered across his desk, seeing them through his eyes for the first time, not as impossible dreams, but as evidence of a talent that someone finally recognized. Maya spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with David's offer. The internship contract lying unopened on her small kitchen table like a door to a world she wasn't sure she was brave enough to enter. Her family's reactions had been as complicated as her own emotions, pride, mixed with worry, excitement tempered by practical concerns. Is too good to be true, her mother had said, frowning at the official Park Industries letterhead. Why important man want to help girl who make coffee? But Carlos had been different. Maya, you've been drawing buildings since we were kids, he'd reminded her. Remember how you used to redesign our school cafeteria on napkins? You said you wanted to make spaces where people felt happy. This is your chance. On Thursday morning, Maya found herself standing in Cornerstone Cafe before dawn, staring at her cafe apron hanging on its familiar hook. The burgundy fabric was soft from countless washings, stained with 3 years of coffee and milk, marked with the evidence of her invisible life. She had worn this apron through long shifts and difficult customers, through dreams deferred and possibilities ignored. Her manager, Janet, found her there when she arrived to open the store. You're early today, she observed, then noticed Maya's expression. Everything okay, honey? Maya pulled the signed contract from her purse, her hands trembling slightly. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice, she said, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. I've been offered an internship. Janet's eyebrows rose. An internship? Doing what? Architecture, Maya whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make the opportunity disappear. Well, I'll be damned, Janet said, breaking into a smile. I always knew you were too smart for this place. Though I have to say, we're going to miss having someone who actually cares about making the perfect cup of coffee. Maya worked her final 2 weeks in a haze of surreal anticipation. Regular customers wished her well when Janet shared the news, and Maya realized that perhaps she hadn't been quite as invisible as she'd thought. Mr. Peterson, the businessman with the Daily Americano, even shook her hand and told her he'd always admired her attention to detail. On her last day, Maya performed the ritual of closing the cafe one final time. She cleaned the espresso machine, wiped down the counters, and counted the register. But when it came time to remove her apron, she hesitated. This piece of fabric represented safety, predictability, the comfort of knowing exactly what was expected of her. She thought of David's daughter's drawing, of the joy in those crayon sun rays, of the courage it must have taken for a 7-year-old to believe that suns could make everything happy. Emma had been right sometimes. The smallest acts of faith could illuminate the darkest corners. Maya untied her apron strings and hung the garment on its hook for the last time. Tomorrow, she would trade her barista uniform for architectural tools, her espresso machine for drafting tables, her small, safe world for the vast unknown territory of her dreams. As she locked the cafe door behind her, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of being truly alive. Maya's first morning at Park Industries began with a company organizational chart that looked like a complex architectural blueprint itself. The hierarchy sprawled across multiple departments, with names and titles that meant nothing to her but clearly held significant weight in this glass and steel ecosystem. She studied it nervously while waiting in the reception area, trying to memorize where she might fit in this intricate corporate structure. Maya-chan? A woman in her 30s approached, dressed in the kind of effortlessly professional attire that Maya had only seen in magazines. I'm Sarah Rodriguez, Senior Associate. David asked me to show you around and get you settled. The tour was overwhelming. Floor after floor of open-plan offices filled with architects bent over drafting tables, computer screens displaying 3D models of buildings that would soon reshape skylines, conference rooms where people spoke in acronyms and technical language that sounded like a foreign tongue. Maya felt like an imposter walking through this world of expertise and confidence. This is the intern pod, Sarah explained, gesturing to a cluster of desks near the windows. You'll be working here with the other summer interns. The other interns looked exactly like Maya had expected: young, polished, eager. They wore clothes that suggested trust funds and family connections, spoke casually about their Ivy League architecture programs, and handled technical terminology with the fluency of people who had been groomed for this world since childhood. Everyone, this is Maya-chan, Sarah announced. She'll be joining the team. Which school? Asked a young man with perfectly styled hair and a Columbia University sweatshirt. His name tag read Preston. I didn't go to architecture school, Maya admitted, her voice barely audible. The silence that followed was brief but telling. Another intern, a woman named Stephanie with Georgetown credentials, raised an eyebrow. Oh, so you're the coffee shop girl? The word stung, but Maya forced herself to nod. News traveled fast in corporate environments, apparently. She could feel the shift in the room's energy, the subtle recalibration of how her new colleagues perceived her. Interesting, Preston said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. I mean, it's great that David believes in giving everyone opportunities, but architecture is incredibly technical. There's so much foundational knowledge that's typically covered in undergrad programs. Maya spent her first week drowning in terminology she didn't understand and software she'd never seen. While the other interns discussed projects with casual confidence, she struggled with basic CAD programs and felt lost in meetings where everyone seemed to speak in code. The organizational chart on her desk became a lifeline, helping her navigate the complex web of relationships and responsibilities that governed the firm's daily operations. Her workspace felt isolated despite being surrounded by activity. She would arrive early and stay late, trying to absorb as much as possible, but the learning curve felt impossibly steep. The other interns were polite but distant, clearly viewing her as an anomaly rather than a colleague. Don't worry about them, Sarah told her one afternoon, noticing Maya's frustrated expression as she struggled with a drafting exercise. Preston and Stephanie have been preparing for this their entire lives. You're starting from a different place, but that doesn't mean you can't reach the same destination. But Maya wasn't sure she believed that. Every day brought new evidence of how much she didn't know, how far behind she was, how unlikely it seemed that someone like her could succeed in a world built for people like them. The cafe seemed very far away, and sometimes she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Maya's confidence lasted exactly 2 weeks, until she encountered the failed project brief that would either make or break her internship. The assignment came from a potential client who had rejected 3 previous proposals from Park Industries, notoriously difficult developer, known for dismissing even the most prestigious firm's work as uninspired and generic. The Meridian Heights project, David announced during the Monday morning meeting, sliding the thick folder across the conference table. Luxury residential tower, 38 floors, targeting young professionals and empty nesters. The client wants something revolutionary, but can't articulate what that means. They've rejected our previous concepts as too conventional. Sarah leaned over to whisper in Maya's ear. This is considered the impossible project. 3 different teams have tried and failed. The client is ... challenging. Maya opened the folder to find page after page of rejected designs, each one more elaborate than the last. The previous proposals were technically perfect soaring glass towers with innovative structural elements, rooftop gardens, and luxury amenities that would make any architecture magazine's cover. But looking at them through the lens of her newfound understanding of human behavior, Maya could see why they had failed. They're beautiful, she said during her review meeting with David, but they don't feel like home. They feel like monuments to wealth rather than places where people actually want to live. Exactly, David replied, which is why I'm assigning this project to you. Maya's stomach dropped. To me? But I'm just an intern. This is a multi-million-dollar project. You're an intern who understands something my senior architects are missing, David said firmly. The client isn't looking for conventional luxury. They want something that connects with people on an emotional level. Your public seating project showed me you can think beyond traditional architectural solutions. The weight of the assignment felt crushing. Maya spent the next week buried in research, studying the site location, analyzing the target demographic, and trying to understand what made a residential building feel like more than just an expensive place to sleep. The failed project brief became her constant companion, its pages marked with notes and sketches, as she tried to unlock the secret of what the client really wanted. Her first presentation was a disaster. The client, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chun, who had built a real estate empire from nothing, listened to Maya's nervous pitch with increasing skepticism. This is the same generic luxury tower every other firm has proposed, Victoria said, coldly, barely glancing at Maya's carefully prepared drawings. Granite countertops and panoramic views don't create community. They create isolation 40 stories above the real world. Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment as Victoria continued. Her critique: I hired Park Industries because of their reputation for innovation. Instead, you're giving me the same tired solutions that turn residential buildings into vertical gated communities for people who want to live above their neighbors rather than among them. The meeting ended with Victoria's ultimatum. One more chance. But this time, I want to see something that actually understands what it means to create home, not just housing. Walking back to the office, Maya felt the familiar urge to disappear, to retreat into the safe invisibility she had known at the cafe. The project brief felt heavier in her hands, weighted with the possibility of failure and the crushing realization that maybe she wasn't ready for this world after all. 3 weeks into her internship, Maya found herself assigned to a project that would change how her colleagues saw her and how she saw herself. The task seemed straightforward: design a public seating area for a new mixed-use development downtown. Preston and Stephanie approached it with textbook solutions, creating clean geometric arrangements that looked impressive in CAD renderings, but felt cold and impersonal. Maya stared at her first professional blueprint, the formal document that would represent her work to the senior architects. The technical drawings were crude compared to her colleagues' polished presentations, her line work hesitant where theirs was confident. But as she sat in the project meeting, listening to the clients describe their vision for a space that would serve the diverse community surrounding the development, something clicked. The demographics are interesting, the client was saying, pointing to a population analysis. We have young professionals, families with children, elderly residents from the senior center next door, students from the community college. The space needs to work for everyone. Maya thought of Cornerstone Cafe, of the careful observation that had been part of her daily routine for 3 years. She had watched how people moved through spaces, noticed what made them comfortable or uncomfortable, seen how the elderly man preferred the table by the window where he could watch the street, while the college students clustered around the large communal table in the back. She had observed thousands of interactions between people and their environment, accumulating a database of human behavior that no textbook could teach. What if we created different zones for different activities? Maya found herself speaking before she realized she had raised her hand. Instead of one large seating area, we could design smaller intimate spaces that flow together, but serve different needs. The room turned to look at her, and Maya felt her face flush. But David, who had been quietly observing from the back of the conference room, nodded encouragingly. Go on. Well, based on what I've observed, Maya caught herself before saying at the cafe and pivoted to more professional language. Based on studies of public space usage, elderly users prefer seating with back support and clear sight lines, while families need spaces where children can be active, but parents can maintain supervision. Young professionals often want places where they can work on laptops, but still feel connected to the community energy. She moved to the whiteboard, her hand surprisingly steady as she sketched her vision. What if we created a series of connected outdoor rooms? A quiet corner with comfortable benches and shade for seniors. A central area with movable furniture that can accommodate different group sizes, and a more dynamic zone with interactive elements for families. The clients leaned forward, intrigued. Maya continued, gaining confidence as she described how subtle changes in elevation and landscaping could create natural boundaries between spaces without walls. How the orientation of seating could encourage both solitary reflection and community interaction. This shows real understanding of how people actually use public spaces, one of the clients said. It's not just aesthetically pleasing, it's functionally intelligent. After the meeting, Preston approached her with an expression she'd never seen from him before: respect. That was impressive, Maya. I never would have thought to analyze the space from a behavioral perspective. We usually focus on the architectural elements and assume people will adapt to our design. Sometimes it helps to start with the people and design around them, Maya replied, surprised by her own confidence. Sarah, who had been taking notes throughout the presentation, smiled at Maya as they walked back to their desks. You know what you just demonstrated? Something that can't be taught in school. The ability to see spaces through the eyes of the people who will actually use them. That's a rare gift. For the first time since arriving at Park Industries, Maya felt like she belonged. Maya's presentation notes were scattered across her desk like fragments of a shattered confidence, each page marked with crossed-out ideas and self-doubt. The words, "create home, not just housing," echoed in her mind as she stared at Victoria's harsh feedback, trying to find meaning in the criticism that felt like a personal attack on her worth. But something shifted that evening as Maya rode the bus home through neighborhoods she had known her entire life. She watched through the window as people returned from work to apartment buildings that looked nothing like the luxury towers she had been designing. These were places where families gathered on front steps, where children played in small courtyards, where neighbors knew each other's names and stories. Home isn't about granite countertops, she murmured to herself, finally understanding what Victoria had been trying to tell her. The next morning, Maya walked into the weekly design meeting with a new sense of purpose. For the first time since starting at Park Industries, she didn't wait to be called upon or hesitate before speaking. I need to completely reimagine the Meridian Heights project, she announced, her voice steady despite the surprised looks from her colleagues. Everything we've proposed has been wrong because we've been designing for an abstract concept of luxury instead of for actual human beings. Preston raised an eyebrow. Maya, the client specifically requested luxury accommodations. That's the entire market demographic. No, Maya said firmly, standing up and moving to the whiteboard. The client said she wanted something revolutionary. What's revolutionary isn't more expensive materials or higher ceilings. It's creating a building that actually fosters community instead of isolation. She began sketching, her hand moving with growing confidence. What if we designed shared spaces that people actually want to use? Not just a sterile lobby and a gym that sits empty, but spaces that encourage interaction and connection. Like what? Sarah asked, leaning forward with interest. A communal kitchen with professional-grade equipment where residents can cook together. Workshop spaces where people can pursue hobbies and teach each other skills. A rooftop garden that's not just decorative, but functional, where people can grow food together. Maya's voice grew stronger with each idea. Flexible community rooms that can accommodate everything from children's birthday parties to book clubs to cultural celebrations. David, who had been quietly observing, smiled. "You're talking about designing for social architecture, not just physical architecture." "Exactly," Maya said, turning back to her sketches. "And instead of isolating people in their individual units, we create natural gathering points throughout the building. Wider hallways with seating areas, shared terraces that connect multiple floors, even something as simple as mailboxes clustered in comfortable spaces where neighbors naturally encounter each other." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed her vision. Then Stephanie, who had barely spoken to Maya since her arrival, said slowly, "This could actually work. It's addressing the loneliness epidemic that affects so many urban professionals." Maya felt something unlock inside her chest, the realization that her voice mattered, that her perspective had value, that the years of quiet observation had given her insights that others couldn't see. She was no longer the invisible barista trying to prove herself worthy of this world. She was an architect with something unique to contribute. Maya's community center design emerged from weeks of intensive work that felt less like labor and more like excavation, as if she were uncovering something that had always existed, waiting for someone with the right perspective to bring it into the light. The innovative design that would define her breakthrough combined everything she had learned from years of watching people interact in the intimate setting of Cornerstone Cafe with the technical skills she had rapidly absorbed at Park Industries. The building she envisioned was unlike any residential tower the firm had previously designed. Instead of a monolithic structure that rose straight up from the street, Maya proposed a series of interconnected blocks that stepped back at different levels, creating outdoor terraces and courtyards that broke down the imposing scale of high-rise living. Each floor had its own character and community spaces, from children's play areas on lower levels to quiet reading nooks and co-working spaces higher up. "The magic happens in the transitions," Maya explained to the design team as she unveiled her scaled model. "Instead of long, anonymous hallways, residents move through varied spaces that encourage natural encounters. Wide landings with comfortable seating, indoor gardens that require community care, even laundry rooms designed as social spaces rather than sterile utility areas." But the centerpiece of her design was the community center that occupied the building's heart, a three-story space that could be reconfigured for different events and activities. Maya had observed how people at the cafe naturally gravitated toward different areas depending on their mood and needs, and she applied that understanding to create flexible spaces that could transform from intimate gathering areas to large community halls. "Look at this," she said, demonstrating how movable walls could reshape the space. Tuesday evening yoga class becomes Wednesday afternoon book club, becomes Friday night cultural celebration. The same space serves different communities within the building, but the design ensures that these different groups encounter each other naturally. Victoria Chun's second visit to Park Industries was markedly different from her first. She spent an hour examining Maya's detailed drawings, asking probing questions about sightlines, traffic flow, and maintenance considerations. Unlike her previous dismissive attitude, Victoria engaged deeply with the design, clearly seeing something she had been searching for. "This central courtyard," Victoria said, pointing to Maya's carefully planned green space. "You've positioned it so that residents can see community activities from their windows without feeling obligated to participate. That's sophisticated understanding of introvert psychology." Maya nodded, pleased that Victoria had noticed the subtle design choice. People need the option of connection without the pressure of forced interaction. The design creates opportunities for community while respecting individual privacy. And the retail spaces on the ground floor, you've integrated them into the residential circulation rather than treating them as separate commercial entities. "The cafe connects directly to the community center," Maya explained. "Residents can grab coffee on their way to a meeting, or community events can spill over into the cafe space. It breaks down the barrier between public and private life in the building." Victoria set down the drawings and looked directly at Maya. "This is exactly what I was looking for. You've created a building that understands how people actually want to live, not how developers think they should live." The approval was more than professional validation. It was recognition that Maya's unique perspective had value, that her years of careful observation had given her insights that traditional architectural training couldn't provide. As Victoria shook her hand and confirmed Park Industries would receive the contract, Maya felt the final pieces of her transformation clicking into place. The award nomination certificate arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Maya's desk, with the kind of formal ceremony typically reserved for senior partners. The Seattle Architecture Foundation had nominated her Meridian Heights, designed for their Emerging Talent Award, recognizing innovative approaches to urban residential development by architects under 30. Maya Chun, Emerging Talent Award nominee, Sarah read aloud, her voice filled with genuine excitement. This is incredible. Most people work years to get recognition from the foundation, but the validation that should have felt triumphant instead brought unexpected complications. As news of Maya's nomination spread through Park Industries, the office dynamics shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. Some colleagues offered congratulations with genuine warmth, but others maintained a careful distance, their smiles tight with something that looked suspiciously like resentment. "I mean, it's great for her," Maya overheard Preston saying to another intern during lunch, his voice carrying across the office's open floor plan. "But let's be honest. How much of this is actually about the design, and how much is about the feel-good story of the barista who made it big?" The words stung more than Maya expected. She had worked tirelessly to prove herself on merit alone, but Preston's casual dismissal suggested that others might view her success as a publicity stunt rather than earned achievement. The nomination certificate that had seemed like validation suddenly felt like evidence of her outsider status. Stephanie was more direct in her skepticism. "I just think it's interesting," she said during a team meeting, her tone carefully neutral. "How quickly someone can go from complete beginner to award nominee. Usually there's a longer learning curve in architecture." Maya felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize for taking up space that others believed belonged to them. The imposter syndrome that she thought she had conquered returned with vengeance, whispering that maybe Preston and Stephanie were right. Maybe she was receiving recognition not because her work was exceptional, but because her story was compelling. "You're questioning yourself again," David observed during their weekly mentoring session, noting Maya's subdued demeanor. "What's going on?" "Maybe they're right," Maya admitted. "Maybe I'm being recognized for the wrong reasons. Maybe I don't deserve this nomination." David leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "Maya, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I've seen countless young architects with impressive credentials produce uninspired work. Your Meridian Heights design was selected for nomination because it solves real problems in innovative ways. The foundation doesn't give awards based on compelling backstories. They give awards based on design excellence." But despite David's reassurance, Maya struggled with the weight of visibility. For someone who had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, having her name and face associated with professional recognition felt exposing and uncomfortable. The spotlight revealed not just her successes, but also the skepticism of colleagues who questioned whether she belonged in it. The nomination certificate sat on her desk, a daily reminder that success came with its own challenges, and that sometimes being seen meant becoming a target. David's daughter's final drawing emerged from a manila folder that he had kept locked in his desk drawer for 3 years. Its edges softened by handling, its colors faded, but still vibrant with the uninhibited joy that only children possess. Emma had created it during her last week of life while recovering in the hospital from what they thought would be minor surgery. Routine procedure that should have sent her home the same day. "She knew she was dying," David said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, as he placed the drawing on his desk next to Maya's award nomination certificate. "The doctor said she couldn't possibly understand that 7-year-old children don't have that kind of awareness. But Emma always seemed older than her years." Maya stared at the drawing, her throat tightening with emotion. The sun that Emma had drawn was enormous, taking up most of the construction paper, its rays stretching to every corner of the page like arms reaching out to embrace the world. Around its edges, Emma had written in careful block letters, "For Daddy when he forgets to be happy." "She gave it to me the night before the complications started," David continued, his fingers tracing the edge of the paper with reverent care. "She said, 'Promise me you'll put this somewhere you can see it every day. Daddy, promise me you won't forget that suns make everything happy.'" The connection between Emma's final gift and Maya's spontaneous latte art became crystal clear, the same instinctive understanding that small gestures of beauty could penetrate even the deepest grief. That kindness could be a form of light in someone's darkness. After she died, I couldn't look at this drawing for months, David admitted. It sat in this drawer, and every time I opened it by accident, I would close it immediately. I thought seeing it would make the pain worse. But that morning when you drew that little sun in my coffee foam, I came back to the office and opened this drawer for the first time since the funeral. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes as she understood the full weight of what her simple gesture had meant. I had no idea, she whispered. Of course you didn't. That's what made it so powerful. David's voice grew stronger, more certain. Emma believed that sons could make everything happy, and you proved her right. Your kindness didn't just brighten my morning, it reconnected me with my daughter's memory in a way that felt like healing rather than heartbreak. The revelation reframed everything Maya had experienced since that Tuesday morning at Cornerstone Cafe. Her transformation hadn't begun with architectural ambition or career planning. It had started with the simple human impulse to offer comfort to a stranger who looked like he needed it. The professional recognition, the award nomination, even the skepticism from colleagues, all of it traced back to that moment when she had chosen kindness over invisibility. This is why I offered you the internship, David said, carefully returning Emma's drawing to its folder. Not because you could draw buildings, but because you understood something that most people in this business forget, that architecture is ultimately about creating spaces where human beings can flourish. You demonstrated that understanding before you ever set foot in this office. Maya finally understood that her journey had never been about proving she belonged in David's world. It had been about bringing her own unique perspective to transform it. Maya's mentorship proposal emerged from months of quiet observation and growing understanding of how talent could remain hidden in plain sight. The document she presented to Park Industries' executive committee was unlike anything this firm had considered before, a systematic approach to identifying and nurturing architectural potential in unconventional places. The traditional recruitment model focuses on top-tier architecture programs, Maya explained to the assembled partners, her voice steady with conviction. But that approach only captures candidates who already had access to resources and opportunities. We're missing extraordinary talent because we're looking in predictable places. The proposal outlined partnerships with community colleges, trade schools, and even service industry employers who might encounter individuals with spatial intelligence and creative problem-solving abilities. Maya suggested design competitions, open to people without formal architectural training, mentorship programs that paired experienced architects with promising candidates from non-traditional backgrounds, and scholarship opportunities that would make architectural education accessible to families like her own. You're talking about fundamentally changing how we think about talent development, observed Margaret Foster, the firm's managing partner. This would require significant investment in people who might not succeed in traditional programs. With respect, Maya replied, the traditional programs aren't succeeding at developing the kind of architects our communities actually need. We keep producing designers who can create beautiful buildings for wealthy clients. But we're not developing architects who understand how to create spaces that serve diverse communities. She clicked to the next slide of her presentation, showing demographic data about Seattle's changing population. The city is becoming more diverse, more economically stratified, and more in need of thoughtful design solutions that address real social problems. We need architects who understand these challenges from personal experience, not just academic study. David, who had been quietly supportive throughout Maya's presentation, leaned forward. What you're proposing isn't just recruitment, it's cultural change within the firm. Exactly, Maya agreed. And the return on investment isn't just measured in billable hours or project awards. It's measured in buildings that actually serve their communities, designs that solve real problems, and architectural solutions that create social value alongside economic value. The program Maya envisioned would identify potential candidates through community partnerships, baristas like herself, construction workers with intuitive understanding of building systems, retail workers who observed human behavior in commercial spaces, even artists and craftspeople whose spatial intelligence had never been channeled into formal architectural training. Each candidate would be paired with a mentor from our senior staff, Maya continued. Not charity cases, but promising individuals who bring unique perspectives to the field. The program would provide both technical training and professional development, with the understanding that different backgrounds create different strengths. Margaret exchanged glances with other partners before speaking. This is ambitious, Maya. It would require us to reimagine not just our hiring practices, but our entire approach to professional development. The best architectural solutions come from unexpected places, Maya said quietly. I'm living proof of that. But for every person like me who gets lucky enough to be noticed, how many others are serving coffee or working construction or cleaning buildings, carrying brilliant ideas that the world will never see? The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Maya had articulated something the firm's leadership knew but rarely addressed, that their industry's exclusivity wasn't just socially problematic. It was professionally limiting. The new cafe design assignment landed on Maya's desk with a note from David that made her smile. Thought you might have some insights on this one. Park Industries had been commissioned to create a cafe space within the ground floor of a new mixed-use development, and the client specifically requested an environment that would serve both as a commercial venture and a community gathering place. Maya spread the project brief across her drafting table, studying the rectangular space with its floor-to-ceiling windows facing a busy downtown street. But instead of seeing square footage and structural limitations, she saw the potential for something that could bridge her two worlds. The architectural sophistication she had developed at Park Industries and the deep understanding of cafe culture she had gained at Cornerstone. Her design process began not with sketches, but with questions that no architectural textbook would have prompted her to ask. What time of day did different types of customers prefer, natural light versus more intimate lighting? How could the space accommodate the laptop-wielding remote worker who needed Wi-Fi and power outlets alongside the elderly couple who wanted a quiet corner for conversation? Where should the ordering counter be positioned to create efficient flow without disrupting the social dynamics of the seating areas? You're approaching this differently than most architects would, Sarah observed, watching Maya create behavioral flowcharts alongside traditional floor plans. Most architects have never worked behind a cafe counter, Maya replied, using colored pencils to map different customer patterns throughout a typical day. They design for aesthetic impact, but they don't understand the micro-interactions that make a cafe successful as a social space. Her final design transformed the rectangular space into a series of interconnected zones, each optimized for different activities and energy levels. The ordering counter curved through the center of the space, creating natural movement patterns, while establishing sight lines that allowed baristas to read the room's mood and adjust service accordingly. High tables near the windows captured morning light for commuters grabbing quick coffee, while lower seating arrangements in the back provided intimate spaces for longer conversation. But the innovation that made Maya most proud was nearly invisible. Careful acoustic design that allowed multiple conversations to coexist without interference. The strategic placement of power outlets that encouraged laptop users to choose specific seating areas, and the modular furniture that could be reconfigured for community events or private gatherings. It's not just a cafe, Maya explained during her presentation to the client. It's a social infrastructure that happens to serve coffee. The design creates opportunities for connection while respecting individual needs for privacy and productivity. The client's enthusiasm was immediate and unqualified. This is exactly what we were hoping for, a space that feels both professionally sophisticated and personally welcoming. As Maya looked at her finished drawings, she realized she had come full circle in the most meaningful way possible. She was no longer the invisible barista dreaming of architectural recognition, nor was she the struggling intern trying to prove her worth in an unfamiliar world. She had become something entirely new, an architect who understood that the best designs emerged from deep empathy for the people who would inhabit them. Maya's employee ID badge felt different in her hands now. The title Senior Associate printed in crisp black letters. Beneath her name, a tangible symbol of how completely her life had transformed in 18 months. But the real measure of change wasn't in her personal advancement. It was in the culture shift that rippled through Park Industries as her mentorship program took root and flourished. The first cohort of non-traditional candidates had exceeded everyone's expectations. There was Marcus, a former construction foreman whose understanding of building systems revolutionized the firm's approach to sustainable design. Elena, a retail manager whose insights into customer flow patterns had transformed their commercial projects. James, a visual artist whose unconventional problem-solving methods had solved engineering challenges that had stumped traditional architects for months. They're not just bringing different skills, David observed during a partners meeting, reviewing the program's first-year results. They're bringing different ways of thinking about fundamental problems. Maya watched through the conference room's glass walls as the office bustled with activity that felt more dynamic and inclusive than when she had first arrived. The rigid hierarchy that had once intimidated her had evolved into something more collaborative, where ideas were valued regardless of their source. The intern pod, once dominated by Ivy League credentials and family connections, now buzzed with diverse perspectives and unconventional approaches to design challenges. Preston, who had initially dismissed Maya as the coffee shop girl, now worked as her project coordinator on the Meridian Heights development. Their relationship had evolved from skepticism to mutual respect as he recognized that her unique background brought value that his traditional training couldn't match. Used to think architecture was about creating impressive buildings, he admitted during a team lunch. Maya taught me it's about creating spaces that actually improve people's lives. That's a completely different design philosophy. The mentorship program's success had attracted attention beyond Park Industries. Other firms in the city were developing their own initiatives to identify and nurture non-traditional talent, creating a network of opportunities that might have remained invisible just 2 years earlier. Maya found herself speaking at conferences, serving on advisory boards, and consulting with architecture schools about expanding their recruitment and pedagogy. But the most meaningful ripple effect was happening at the individual level. Maya received emails from baristas, retail workers, and service industry employees who had heard about her story and were pursuing their own architectural dreams. Some had enrolled in community college design courses. Others had started sketching, building improvements at their workplaces. And a few had even applied for the mentorship programs that were spreading throughout the industry. You've created something bigger than a career development program, Sarah told her as they reviewed applications for the program's second cohort. You've created a movement. The applications came from every corner of the service economy hotel. Housekeepers who had observed how room layouts affected guest comfort. Restaurant servers who understood the flow patterns that made spaces functional. Delivery drivers who had developed intuitive knowledge about urban navigation and accessibility. Each application represented someone who had been invisible to the traditional architectural establishment but possessed insights that could transform the profession. Maya's office wall now displayed not just her own award certificates, but photos from the program's graduates as they moved into positions throughout the industry. Each face represented a ripple in the pool that had started with a simple act of kindness in a small cafe, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures create the most profound changes. The transformation was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed as unqualified for careers they were naturally suited to pursue. Maya's new business cards arrived on a Thursday morning, their clean design reflecting the professional confidence she had earned through 2 years of transformation. Maya Chun, Senior Associate, Park Industries, was embossed in elegant lettering, but it was the small architectural line drawing in the corner, a subtle sun rising behind a building silhouette that made her smile. It was a reminder of where her journey had begun and how far she had traveled. That afternoon, she found herself walking through the familiar streets of her old neighborhood, past the community college where several of her mentorship program graduates were now teaching design courses, past the family markets where she had shopped with her parents, toward the destination that had been calling to her for weeks. Cornerstone Cafe looked exactly the same from the outside. Its hand-painted sign, slightly more weathered, its windows still revealing the warm interior that had been her second home for 3 years. But as Maya pushed through the door, the familiar chime announcing her arrival. She felt like a different person entirely from the shy barista who had once worked behind that counter. "Maya!" Janet's voice carried across the cafe, filled with genuine joy. "Look at you, all professional and successful." The cafe buzzed with the same gentle energy Maya remembered. Customers clustered around tables with their laptops and conversations, the espresso machine hissing its familiar rhythm. But now she saw it through an architect's eyes, noting how the natural lighting influenced seating choices, how the acoustic design created intimate conversation pockets, how the traffic flow had been optimized, perhaps unconsciously, by years of observing customer behavior. "I can't believe it's been 2 years," Maya said, accepting Janet's warm embrace. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes like a lifetime." "You look happy," Janet observed, stepping back to study Maya's face. "Not just successful genuinely. Happy. That's not always the same thing." Maya nodded, understanding exactly what Janet meant. The happiness she felt wasn't just about professional achievement or financial security, though both had transformed her family's circumstances. It was deeper than that, a satisfaction of knowing that her work mattered, that she was creating spaces that improved people's daily lives, that she had found a way to contribute meaningfully to the world. A young woman behind the counter caught Maya's attention, probably about the age Maya had been when she started working here, moving with the same careful efficiency, the same desire to remain unnoticed. Maya watched her create a perfect latte for a tired-looking businessman, adding a delicate leaf pattern to the foam with unconscious artistry. "That's Sophia," Janet said, following Maya's gaze. "She's been with us about 6 months. Reminds me of you, actually quiet, observant, but there's something special about her. She draws these amazing pictures during her breaks." Maya felt a familiar stirring, the recognition of potential that might otherwise remain hidden. She approached the counter, studying Sophia's careful work, noting the way she unconsciously adjusted her service style for different customers, how she created small moments of beauty, even in routine transactions. "Your latte art is beautiful," Maya said gently. And Sophia looked up with surprise, her cheeks flushing with the same self-consciousness Maya remembered so well. "Thank you," Sophia whispered. "It's just something I do for fun." Maya reached into her purse and pulled out one of her new business cards, placing it carefully on the counter. "I'd love to talk with you sometime about the drawings Janet mentioned. I run a program that helps people explore careers in architecture and design." As she walked out of Cornerstone Cafe, Maya felt the profound satisfaction of a circle completed and a new one beginning. The sun was setting behind the Seattle skyline, its light reflecting off the glass facades of buildings that tomorrow would shelter thousands of people in spaces designed by architects who understood that the best designs emerge from empathy, observation, and the simple recognition that everyone deserved to be seen. Some ripples, Maya realized, never stop expanding.